I live in a post-fitness world because there's no definition. The word doesn't mean anything, but it can mean everything. It's been ripped apart and drugged and like had different suits put on it and then abused and used for different kinds of things.
James, we are talking fitness today. Specifically, we're going to talk about, we're going to try to answer this question very succinctly over the next 45-ish minutes. So we need to finish at minute 45 agreeing on this question, the definition of this. And if we don't agree on it at 45 minutes, we're just going to keep rolling. So this could be a marathon episode of you and I just talking about fitness until someone gives up. Fitness is the medium that connects people to their highest values. What say you today on that, James?
You know, it was really at the start of the Big Dogs blog and my journey post, CrossFit shakeup, let's say, because CrossFit and Greg Glassman did shake up first proposing that question, and then I tried to develop my own, right? And it was really lengthy. And I remember presenting on it every time we had an Optathlon or a CCP event or a podcast or et cetera. And it always came, it in different words, it always still aligned with what I spoke about there in that clip was, so it's a process and it's a means to an end. And I'm not just saying those two things, but that's what I think about, Carl, when I just heard myself from 10 years ago. I definitely do have a different view on it because I'm not, connected in it in a day-to-day fashion anymore. So at that time, I was coaching coaches. I was coaching coaches of coaches, and I was also coaching athletes. I was also doing my own fitness journey, and I was coaching, I guess you could say, my family and those really close to me. So, I had my hands in all different kinds of, so I'd be able to say, broadly, I think. But now where I sit now, it's very personal for me. And it's almost, dare I say, private. It's almost a thing that I'm not really sure people should know about in what fitness is to me. And that doesn't change my definition of it. But I think what you may extract from that is that I think at this point in my life, the definition of fitness is very personal. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't have some objective, bona fide direction and things that people should do with regards to fitness inside of that. But it's quite private, and it's something that it's a word that I'll add to. It's a private affair, very personal. It's a personal journey.
How do you connect fitness to physical activity? What are the associations between fitness and physical activity?
It's a great question because it's very difficult for me to extract the broadness of fitness, that just envelops so many different things. And I won't go on and on about it, but I'll just be really clear on it. That's why I call it, and I live in a post-fitness world, because there's no definition. The word doesn't mean anything, but it can mean everything. It's been ripped apart and drugged and like had different suits put on it and then abused and used for different kinds of things. So that word, it's very difficult for me to see that physical activity and what I like to call physical expression. Physical expression is a part of fitness for sure, but they're not the same thing. Yeah, physical expression is, as I mentioned, in different words for today, it's, it used to be a necessity. Like we used to physically express ourselves because we could, and because we recognized, well, we just have to do this to kind of keep moving forward, But then as I say, I'm not sure when it happened. I just throw a date like 1971 because a bunch of other crazy stuff happened in 1971. From 1971 on to 2021, just make it 50 years, so it sounds cool. It then became by choice. Physical expression was by choice for all the wrong reasons. So physical expression lost its, dare I say, beauty and purity. and naivety. Do you see how highly I speak of physical expression and how it feels dirty to include it in the same thing with fitness?
So there's a demarcation in your head between physical activity and expression. If I were to start this off, James, and I were to say, trying to like really dig deep into like the foundational definition of how we should look at expression and activity, and I were to say like, okay, how do I explain this to someone very simply? It's like any movement that you do on a day-to-day basis that expends energy. Like, does that connect with your definition of just physical expression as a starting point?
No, I think what you were describing there was probably a conversation with the layman who probably has already been corrupted with the idea of physical expression. You just gotta do activity because it's gonna burn calories, right? And you're like, well, kind of, and you answer it the way you did. So I guess just to use those two words, it used to be physical activity, but now it's physical expression. So used to activity has that feeling around it that you're just being active for, as I said, this for necessity or just because you could. Leisure. You just like, hey, what do we want to do? Let's move around. Let's, go for a bike ride. Let's boat in the river. Let's, do some calisthenics at the park, like, et cetera, But then expression, you see, has this willful thing inside of it. So it's something that you're deriving and you're coming up with. Mm-hmm. That's where my language sits on the difference between those two, as you kind of just set it out. So I guess today it's around physical expression, and where I sit on that. The majority of people, 99% of humans, don't need to physically express themselves, but we have to. Well, if we are going to, because we know we have to, what do we choose to do? And how do we choose to do it? And then you get into, well, what is the overall goal and intentions? And now we're back to square one when we discussed, well, what's the reason for doing any of that stuff? And it has to come on that base support of because it's for you and it's because you're capable of doing it.
I think that's an interesting way to look at it, right? Because the expression, when you say that, James, I'm like, yeah, it's the same thing, activity and expression, but it's a more refined way to explain it because there's intentionality behind it. But on top of physical expression, so now you convince me. So now I'm going to use your word and make it my own. On top of physical expression, now there's intentionality behind it, right? Like, am I expressing myself to play? Am I expressing myself to perform, to compete, to challenge, or just to live because I need to express myself out of necessity to do the things that I need to do to live? Lower percentage of the population today. But to me, now that definition that you just laid out of physical expression, now when we get into the conversation around fitness, I think expression has to sit underneath that as more foundational. And then fitness, I'm going to kind of get to the end really quick. Fitness is the result of how you physically express yourself day in and day out. What are your thoughts on that? Because I think fitness is a byproduct of what you're doing in your own physical expression. And then we can talk about the relativity of fitness and how I think some old definitions of fitness actually fell short because they didn't consider some things. They mostly considered the metric or the outcome. They didn't consider other things that we'll talk about today.
Yeah, I like it. I think it is definitely an upgrade and we're moving along. And this is, of course, all the things you go through when you want to hammer on this idea of defining it. So, and as you know, I'm always ready for that and ready for changes of that. And I'll do it again in 10 years. But the reason why I don't think what comes up for me, Carl, is that it feels like fitness is, and now we're into like having an idea around how we're going to define that word. I've already said that I think it's nothing anymore, but now I'm going to have a stab at it. It's not just physical, there's behaviors as well. And there's fueling of the human as well. Right. And that's our three pillars of what we give as a coach. We give behaviors, we give exercise, and we give nutrition. And so that's why I'm kind of hesitant on saying that fitness is only a physical entity, because otherwise you'll have, which you do have, a ton of assholes around who have 8-packs and eat seed oils all day, but hey, physically expressing themselves. You see what I'm saying? And now we're like, well, are they fit? Are they fit than someone else? Should they define what the word fitness is? So it has to have, and I don't mean you, well, I guess you can't be. You can't be an asshole and be superiorly fit in my mind. Anyways, I think the idea of just saying it's a physical entity is where I'm kind of a little hesitant, but maybe you're willing to upgrade and add stuff to it.
No, that it's funny you said that, because when I said some variables were left out of the older definitions of fitness, that's exactly where I was going. It just being like, I'm able to physically do these things. So if we were to wrap that language around it of behavior, exercise, and nutrition, and we were to talk about, okay, like, our level of fitness, quote unquote, has to take all of those into account. At the end of the day, it's like, I'll use this language, and then we can kind of wrestle with it and, try to adapt it to the behavior and nutrition piece. But I think a lot of coaches listening will understand this. You do something, you recover from that thing, and then you do it again. You do something, you recover from that thing, and you do it again, right? In very, very simple terms. Now, how do we connect that to behavior, right? You experience something, you figure it out, and you move on. You experience something, and like there's a lot inside of that, like figuring it out. It's like, that's some deep thought sometimes, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's like, you have to have the emotional fitness to actually deal with that thing, to get over it, to adapt to it, to repeat it, and you know what I mean? So on and so forth. And then the same thing with nutrition, right? What does it look like to be nutritionally fit, right? What does it look like to be behaviorally fit? What does it look like to actually start to add these practices into our day-to-day? Where does consistency and rhythm fit into fitness, right? Like, that's a conversation that we need to have as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard to kind of explain all of that in one simple definition. You know what I mean? That's why I think this is such an interesting, more left brain conversation. That's always just fun to have. I was kind of joking when I said in 45 minutes we need to have a distinct definition, unless we're not going to stop this shit. Like, there's no way we can get there and cover all bases in a single sentence.
There's no like you said, I think there's no reason why you can't strive to redefine it over time. And I don't think it becomes circular and whatnot. I think you just, provided an opportunity for us to, as we say, put our stake in the ground in 2026. And say, it's so. By the way, I consider consistency and lifestyle practices under the behavior realm. Mm-hmm. There could be an argument in there too, but so if we were to put a stake in the ground and say this newest definition of fitness, because this is the way I think about it, the same way I have no problem saying that when someone's behaviors align with them, long-term progressing in their mind and being more mentally acute and striving for, let's just call it the golden rule. And you can, whatever the golden rule is in multiple people's brains based upon their faith or their beliefs and understanding, it's all good. I think all of that combined, I would consider that someone more fit than another. And I'm not going to use a cliche like, are you fit in your faith? Are you fit in your finances? Are you fit in your, it's not like that. But I'm thinking that we have an opportunity to say that there are behaviors and physical expressive practices and nutrition practices that will lead to higher orders of fitness. And there is lower and higher orders in there. There's a scalar perspective of what that is. And that was my joke on the asshole eating seed oils and having an 8-pack, is that we leave out a whole bunch of things when we don't say, and I'm not saying there's a judger, a watchmaker or a watcher. I'm just saying that, only you know if you're striving to improve your behaviors and your exercise habits and your nutrition habits. Only you know that in the end. But the striving to improve those, as I said, from lower to highest order is, I think we're now working on it. We're into a working definition of a new style of fitness that works well for OPEX, right? But works well possibly for you and me.
As you were rolling, I just wrote down behavior is actually everything. Because you said that you would put consistency in the behavior bucket. And I'm thinking about that. I'm like, no, I would actually put everything in the behavior bucket. I think behavior is everything sits underneath behavior. The foods that we choose to eat, the movement that we choose to do or not, so on and so forth, right? So I think everything sits under the behavior piece. And I think when you get to, we had our CCP call yesterday, and we talked about BLGs for an hour. And we did talk about the differences between higher order and lower order prescriptions. And one thing that I pointed out, James, I was like, guys, this isn't a jockeying for position and say, like, these are the things that are really good and better, and these lower order things are not. It's not that. It's lower order actually means that you're not seeing the forest through the trees. You're band-aiding things along the way. That's lower order. Not that those tactics don't have their place, but it's when you jump to those band-aids or to those tactics when you need to fix something way, way deeper and more foundational. We were talking about the nutrition stuff, right? It's like, what are some really good nutritional principles that you need to look at, assess, discern if those things are being, adhered to or not, and like just make sure that you're focusing on those things. And it's like, that is so simple and principle based, but it's higher order. It's higher order because you're handling the foundation. You're not jumping at a tactic. So I want to make sure you agree with me on that lower order versus higher order thinking. I just want to make sure that people, when they hear that, they're just not like, whoa, the pedestal thinking and like, oh, like this is the best way to do it. It's like, yeah, it's the best way to do it because it's more foundational and impactful.
What we're doing right now is a practice of philosophy. It's a practice of just asking questions and just putting stuff out, that's inside of our brain and having conversations. So, and if you don't like it, then why don't you come up with a better definition, right? Or why don't you come up with what you think are the 3 pillars? Or why don't you come up with what you think is the base level foundational things that lead to all the other ones? And then come back with your claim, and then we can kind of bang it around. So that's what we're practicing inside of that. A wise person, much wiser than me, once said, I think, therefore I am. So I would agree with you that if it's outside of fitness, some developmental psychologists would disagree with you on that, or disagree with us on that, meaning that the nurturing that one gets, right? So just think about a little baby. The nurturing has to come from fuel from the mama, in the most developmental way possible, or the best developmental way possible. And then communication and nurturing, just encapsulated in nurturing, before they can actually get to a physical manifestation of movement. And then before they can get to like requiring fuels outside of that. And then of course, at some certain age where, their brain is a little bit bigger and a little bit more developed, and now they're kind of on their way towards, quote unquote, these choices and then behaviors that come with these choices. Do you get my point on that, in terms of like, you can go multiple different angles to determine, psychologically and philosophically, what is the thing? What is the starting point? But I do agree with you. But when you extract the B from the E and the N in our conversation here on fitness, I think you and I then just enter into the town square. We're not inside the fitness universe anymore, right? And I like that. But if we're in the fitness universe, and this is where we, make our keep, and this is where we can stand up on a soapbox and say some truths, then I think we do need to keep them almost equal as partners, like a team approach. And if I was to write it, or if Bernie was to write it, on a higher order principle format, it would kind of look like this. Do you see that? It's all together, but it's encapsulated. Like you can't get to levels of exercise and nutrition if you don't have the choices and the practice of those choices, right? And deciding upon those choices, and the awareness, and the all the things that come inside of that. So agreeing with a bunch of stuff you said, I just want to make the point that if we're kind of being in fitness, I think the BEN has to has to stick together in that. It allows then coaches to be like, well, let's just dig in hard on nutrition for you, Lisa. Do you know what I mean? And it allows them to just don't worry about all the other things come with that. Let's just focus now on like the knowledge around how much potassium is in, certain fruits and vegetables.
I think a lot of coaches feel overwhelmed. We are trying really hard to make this simple and principle based and like just do X and some really good things will happen downstream, so on and so forth. But I think a lot of coaches that listen to this conversation, James, because coaches are like taking notes or thinking like, okay, how am I going to apply this to, the way that I work with my people, help my people, meet myself and how I think about fitness. One thing that I would say is that we all have to be unbelievably patient. And on that same note, we can't be in a hurry, right? So the behavior and the exercise and the nutrition, although it seems so simple, you can work with someone in one of those areas for like 18 months straight and still not get to a place that you want to get with that individual, if that makes sense. Like Lisa's example, it's like, hey, we're just going to focus on the end right now. For whatever reason, we've identified we're going to focus on the end. I think a lot of brains, James, they're like, oh, no, like I need to focus on the N in this mesocycle. And then in 4 weeks, I need to move over to the B. And then because I need to fix everything. I need to fix everything in 90 days, right? I think that, and this is the conversation we had yesterday. It's like, calm down, right? Calm down, be patient. When you're working with a human, it's going to probably be a little bit complex, right? It might not be as linear as you want it to be, or like you read in the textbook, right? It's just like, you just need to understand what the thing is that you need to dig in on and spend the time required to dig in on it. And don't work against this timeline of like a mesocycle where now you're moving to the next thing. And, when we talked about that, James, a lot of people's heads were just like, well, what do you mean? Like, I'm with this person, like I promised in 6 months and we were going to be, it's just like, no, yeah, don't promise, number one. Right. And number two, just relax, man. Like this, people have been building these behaviors and these practices, or maybe not these practices, for many, 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 many years. It might take a little bit of time to get them in a cadence in which they're doing some of these things that you just know in your heart and your being that these things are just good for them, and you just want them to start doing them tomorrow, right? It's just like that's the dance a little bit, right? It's like how do we get Lisa there, So
coaches, it's good to know the coach. It's good for all the current coaches to know the history of our education program, because we never really did say like there was one course that was more important than all the courses. But we did in-house say there was one course that was more important than all the courses, and it was life coaching, or it was the lifestyle consulting aspect, or the sitting down and building relationships with people. And that would take a 2-day course. Sharon and I, or Bernie and I used to do it. Then Sharon and I used to do it. Then we kind of put it into an online format, and it's at its point, it's all together now. But this is just a reflection, Carl, so that coaches know that the base of our program, like most of all the issues that you're going to come with as you're learning from Carl now, or that it's going to come up, and you turn around, you're like, oh, I'm dealing with Lisa tomorrow. If you really listen carefully in the consulting aspect of the course, you're really going to be able to your point, Carl, have a little bit more patience. You're gonna bring the tension down in the room, because the way our whole method and the whole idea is set up is for us to allow you to build a relationship with someone. So there's no, so to ask the question 6 months, I mean, that doesn't even work inside of OPEX. You see what I'm saying? So, and it's not, oh, well, I just need a new business plan to fix it. No, you need a better you. Now take that the right way, but you need a better you. How do you get to become a better you, i.e. the best coach possible? You need to understand the importance of consulting and building yourself as the best person possible, what you call the best helper, right, Carl? Because then that allows these questions, and I say this to coaches all the time, and I sound like a soothsayer or some sage when I say it. But then years later, they all come back and they're like, sure as shit, James, I was like, if your clients, if you come with this peace of mind and an open space with people in your consultation, you're a really good listener, and you're open to, downloading all this stuff about this person, over time, they won't ask those questions. They won't ask you to get things done in 6 months, because you're going to give off this like, listen, I'm just here to pass on what I believe is the best way forward for most people, like a Mandalorian style. This is the way mask that you wear, and that's really truly what the coach is going to fall in love with, I think, is this consulting aspect and being able to answer that question, so succinctly. Because then we can jam in on the behavior, exercise, nutrition, because it's embedded inside the coaching practices. We lead coaches all towards those things, right?
Even when you're well beyond the module, right? The life coaching consulting module, and you're into week 19 of your fitness program or your nutrition program, you're still asking yourself, what are the things that I'm noticing? Am I explaining these noticings? Am I prescribing against what I know to be true now after those last two stages? And how am I coming back and assessing if this thing is working or not, right? Like that's just it's a very helpful way to calm down, right? To I don't even want to use the term systematically, but you know what I mean when I say that. To have a conversation, to design a training program, to try to lead someone to living a more consistent and sustainable lifestyle, to get someone to eat the foods that that are going to make them feel really great tomorrow. You know what I mean? It's like, it's all in that framework that just like expands outside of just like sitting. I don't want to say just like sitting, but outside of sitting in front of someone and just having a really good conversation, So there's some really good tools that, we always tell people. It's like, don't forget those tools when we get past this module. Those tools expand into everything. Everything expands back into understanding people a little bit better. Like you said, continuing to work on yourself and systematically doing things, not doing things on a whim, and being able to explain those things to people, I think is unbelievably important, and bringing them into the fold. Okay, going back to fitness. How do you think a coach should think about? And when I say a coach, I'm talking about someone that's working with humans one-to-one to try to move that person forward, whatever that means for them right now. Okay. How should they think about this concept of fitness, this word fitness? Like, how would you, if you're consulting with a coach right now and the coach asks you that question, how would you answer that question generally?
Generally, I think I'd make sure that they define it really well for themselves. Like they don't have to like write it down and not share it or burn it or whatever, but they have to be good with, because I fell prey to not knowing, and then, taking on Glassman's definition of fitness. I didn't keep it for too long, but, I did. And I just was making mention of that because there was another instances back in, university days that it was largely around the professional consulting realm and how they define fitness, right? It was a very biological, scientific version of it, right? It took I would call it the human aspect out of it. So I would ask that coach to first really feel good with what they believe, is like an ideal version of that definition of fitness for themselves, and then that which carries over to all after that. And so if I think that's what I would generally say to that coach, because because I'm just trying to picture that coach, sitting with a bunch of different people and then not really feeling good in their shoes about what fitness is. That's a difficult proposition for that coach to ask, let's say, Lisa, who as from your assessment, she you know what she really needs? She really needs just someone to talk to. And it sounds cliche, I know, but sometimes that's all is necessary. She needs someone to talk to so she can kind of like work these things out through conversation. And all she needed was you to listen to, and you to be like, oh yeah, I think broccoli at supper is a great idea. And she's like, oh my gosh, I kind of knew it. Anyways, but if that coach is not good in that place, it's not going to work out well, because now that doesn't mean you got to stop now, but it does mean you have to like pull up your pants and you got to like get going on challenging what Carl and I are discussing today to define what fitness is for you specifically, and then how it bleeds out from you to be possibly meaning for all. And if you get stuck there, then just come on back and try to define it again. And then you'll land on some things that will work well for you. And then all of a sudden you're going to be surrounded by people who are going to indirectly ask you, well, James, or to take it on Mark, what is your definition of fitness? And Mark's going to be able to say, well, I think it's very personal. This may not be what Mark would say, but he says something like this. I think it's very personal, but that doesn't make it subjective in its in its goals. I think that it's a process for people of physical expression and behaviors around their lifestyle and their nutritional practices. And I think people can get good and even great in all three of those areas, but it's specific to them in what they need to improve and get better at. And there's no comparables. There's sure shit no points on the board for it. Not in this gym. And you get to lay that out and make it fitness for yourself. And I think the client will look at Mark and then be like, yeah, that's a great definition of fitness. Like, I'm all in. I'm inspired, Mark. Like, what, I like that because, yeah, my friend John, he was telling me, like, this is what fitness is. And I see him doing this and I see these wearables and I read all this. I was like, but that's not for me. That's not going to help me right now. And Mark's like, yeah, exactly. Do you see what I mean? Like, it has to be for you. And it has to be something, that kind of aligns you with what you're currently capable of, and I'm here to help you put all those things together. Like, I'm sold.
Yeah.
18 months.
Yeah, let's go, man. I'll sign 2 years if you give me 5% off. Yeah, the last piece of this statement that you said a decade ago that connects people to their highest values. I think we need to, when we think about what does that mean, right? Someone's highest values. I think it's okay to be broad there. And I think that it's okay to, I guess what I'm trying to say, it's okay to not feel like you have to continue to dig for 16 years to really understand what someone's highest values truly are. Someone's highest values are, most likely somewhat what they're telling you they are when you sit down and you consult with them. You know what I mean? Like they're in that example, what I'm getting at is the connection piece, I think, is unbelievably important here. When Mark's sitting down with, I don't know if this is Lisa or Janice or who this is that Mark's sitting down with at this point, but when Mark's sitting down with her, he needs to be able to connect that definition to what's going to resonate with the person on the other side, because that definition it has to be relative to the individual. There's principles, right? I just had like the perform, recover, repeat, the ability to like do something over and over. Resilience is definitely in there. All that stuff is in that definition of fitness. But how it's going to resonate and how that person is going to take ownership of their own definition of fitness has to connect to them and what you said 10 years ago, their highest values. And that's the beauty with sitting across from someone, connecting with them, teaching them, building a relationship with them, and connecting these things to the things that are important to them right now. So I just wanted to point that out, that full circle piece, right? Because we're obviously in full agreement there. I think it has to be relative to the person, I guess is what I'm getting at.
Sharon did a great job of that, embedding some of the DeMartini value determination process principles. We pull from multiple minds, but that's a really good one there, because just to lay out some examples, not lengthy, but that person that's there in front of you, this is what I meant when I would say I'd start every course with, no one sees the world the way you do. And the way you see the world, sometimes there's not a lot of people that ever get access to that, nor do they care the way you see the world. And the reason why I start with that is that it makes you realize everyone is in a different place in this thing, right? And then when you get those people in front of you, you got a breastfeeding mother, you have a stressed older guy at the end of his vitality. You've got, see, the list can go on, right? So there's not a booklet that says, well, this is gonna be the highest values.
Yeah.
That's the greatest aspect. Again, I go back to, saying that the consulting aspect and building relationship is so important and so key. And I know I don't want to sound like you've got to do it, but you got to fall in love with that. You do. You got to fall in love with it. You got to be curious about people. You got to be a chameleon and be able to like move and shake and show up as a different person who's going to be resonating with that other person where their highest values are, because it doesn't mean you got to talk the talk, but you got to be going like this. Yeah, I get you. I get you. That must be difficult. You're saying things like that, right? Or you're like, oh, that's so great that you're choosing that as something you're trying to improve on about yourself. Tell me more about that. So these little things, I'm just trying to give you an example of the importance, just to lay on your point, Carl, the importance of that relationship building aspect to eventually, and this is not to tie the knot, but to eventually the whole process there, you and your client are working on defining the fitness. You're defining fitness for that person, all in that process, all in the consulting, all in the stories that you've built with people, in the relationships you've built with people. You've been with this person for 3 or 4 years. You could probably write a book about Lisa's definition of fitness, right? Because inside of it, you'll have all the inside scoop of the journey and the process and all the things that they went through to define it for them.
What do you believe is and I might be setting you up here to throw this question away based on what you said at the beginning of our conversation. But what do you believe the ultimate aim should be for everyone as it has to do with their fitness?
I would say awareness, physical expression being constructed today. Like we have to construct this thing, right? And we don't need to do it, but we construct it because we know inside of it, there's some beneficial things of us finding solutions to the physical problems and the mental problems and the stuff we come up with. But we have to design that. We're the ultimate designer of that. So, and where awareness falls into that, I was always fine with individuals doing whatever they wanted to do, caveat, if they were aware of what I had just previously said. If they're aware of the fact that we don't need to do this, but we're deciding to make those choices, right? We're deciding to set up this consistency and rhythm, right? Because like the word I would use in my 6 F's of fitness thing, because we're believers. Mm-hmm. Belief, I use the small f, faith inside of that is you got to believe in that, because there's not going to be any studies or no proof or evidence to show that that's going to make you the ideal version of yourself. There's no evidence to show that. So you got to believe. You do have to believe. You got to be a believer. You got to be a believer. And then as you experience it over time, you'll be like, yeah, I feel so good. I have all these aha moments. I'm so mentally acute. I'm a better person. I'm kinder, et cetera, et cetera. So all that comes, I think, to answer your question, from the ultimate vision and striving should be awareness. Open-eyed, and let's put it into psychological terms, emotionally intelligent, emotionally aware. Maybe I'm not doing a good job at putting in psychological or clinical terms, but yeah, it's that, yes, eye to eye is what people say, I guess, across the desk,
Yeah.
You can look in someone's eyes and you guys could, just do the head nods and you kind of are with it, or, people are really listening in and they kind of get it,
The ultimate aim, in your opinion, is the ultimate aim with all of this stuff as it has to do with fitness? Is it to get someone more in alignment or more synergized with the things that they ought to be doing?
And in the end, I already said where I sit. All I want is to them wink, knowing what is the ideal path. I just want them to know it. I don't care if they practice it. As long as you don't hurt other people, I don't care. So that answers your question on what people ought to do. Is like, well, I'm going to be careful of getting into, again, this is where we start getting humorous on a dictatorial authoritarian rule. What should they be doing? Well, I already told you what I think they should be doing. Challenging themselves every day, eating real food, and learning new things.
That sets us up nicely for next week's conversation, the is versus the oughts.
Oh, we're going there.
The is versus the oughts. We'll try to keep it physiological, but we won't stop there. We won't stop there. Okay. Awesome. Thanks, James. Appreciate it. And
thank you, Carl.